COVID's tragic toll and the abortion fallout.
1 million empty chairs around the family dinner table, each irreplaceable losses.
A grim new milestone, 1 million Americans dead from COVID-19. In their memory, flags fly at half-staff.
We can't wait till the fall, it'll be too late.
But the Biden administration warns of another surge in the coming months, up to 100 million new infections, as Congress is deadlocked on funding for COVID. Meanwhile, the backlash over abortion grows louder as a key vote to protect access to abortion fails in the Senate. Plus,
Donald Trump loves West Virginia, and West Virginia loves Donald Trump.
this week, midterm results reveal the power of former President Trump's endorsement and its limits. Next.
This is Washington Week. Corporate funding is provided by...
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewens with the Ewen Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Washington Week. I'm Judy Woodruff, in tonight for Yamiche Alcindor. The nation has suffered a loss of once unthinkable proportions. More than 1 million Americans dead from COVID-19. So many around the country are mourning the loss of friends and loved ones. That toll represents one death for every 327 Americans. That's a number equal to the population of San Jose, California, the country's 10th largest city. On Thursday at the Global Pandemic Summit, President Biden marked the tragic milestone. He asked world leaders to renew their commitment to fighting the virus.
There's still so much left to do. This pandemic isn't over, and with thousands still dying every day, now is the time for us to act, all of us together.
He also called on Congress to provide more COVID-19 funding, but the path ahead for that aid is uncertain. Joining me tonight to discuss this and more, Manu, Raju, Chief Congressional Correspondent for CNN, Seung Kim, she's the White House reporter for The Washington Post, and Susan Page, Washington Bureau Chief for USA Today. It's so good to see both of you at the table, and you, Manu, remotely, and we are so glad to have you here with us tonight. And let's start, Seung, by talking about that package that the White House is asking for. Remind us, what exactly, how much are they asking for, and what is in that package?
So when they initially put forward that request to Congress, they had asked for more than $22 billion to cover the cost of additional therapeutics, vaccines, all of these essentials that the country needs to continue fighting this pandemic. But several months ago, they were supposed to put it in this must-pass package in Congress to fund the government, but that got left out over disputes on how to pay for it. So now we're looking at kind of this orphan package. Because of protests from Republicans, that already $22 billion has been sliced by more than half. We're now talking about $10 billion, but there are a lot of other complications here too. For example, the biggest complication with that package is Republicans insisting on a vote on retaining Title 42, that pandemic-era border policy that expels people at the border for public health reasons. That order is set to lift May 23rd. There are some legal and judicial rulings that may change that date, but right now Republicans are insisting on a vote. A lot of Democrats in Congress oppose the administration's plans to lift that policy. Yeah. So all of that is kind of, the COVID aid is kind of getting tangled up in midterm year election politics, immigration politics.
Excuse me, it's gotten very messy.
Exactly, very much so.
So Manu, from the Hill perspective, I mean, they've been asking for this money, as Seung just suggested, for some time, and here we are, and there's a problem. Why?
Yeah, it's been actually months in the making, this problem, and in large part, not just because of the disagreement over the Title 42 policy, and that, as Seung rightly points out, that is absolutely stalling things at the moment, but also Democrats have really struggled to get their own ducks in a row. Back in March, there actually was a deal for about $16 billion worth of COVID aid, and that was a deal that was cut between Nancy Pelosi, Kevin McCarthy, Mitch McConnell, and Chuck Schumer, along with the top appropriators in both the House and the Senate on the Republican and Democratic side. They're going to roll that into a massive package to fund the government. But Democrats in the rank and file in the House rebelled. They revolted over it because Republicans had insisted that that $16 billion be offset with spending cuts. And there were concerns among some of the Democrats about where those cuts were coming from, where those offsets were coming from. Some of them would have come from their own states, from unused COVID money that they believed that were obligated to their states, and they pushed back. And that essentially forced Pelosi, who essentially did not have the votes to pass that massive government spending bill out of the House, she had to nix that $16 billion package altogether. And as a result, things have been stalled for some time. And there was that deal that was cut in the Senate for a smaller package, $10 billion between the Republicans and Democrats. They got rid of international COVID aid, dealing with how to deal with this on the global level. They had to get rid of that in order to get a deal with Republicans to fully pay for it, to offset the cost of this package. But then that $10 billion, as Seung pointed out, got wrapped into the election year politics of dealing with how to target that Title 42 policy at the border. Now, Republicans are insisting on an amendment dealing with Title 42 as part of the COVID package. Chuck Schumer, the majority leader, has resisted that, but he is facing increased pressure from top Democrats, including ones who are up for re-election, including the number 2 Democrat, his chief deputy, Dick Durbin, who told me this week that it is inevitable that they'll ultimately have to cave to Republican demands. So it seems like eventually they're going to have to give Republicans a vote. Potentially they can get this through, but still, when they get this through, Judy, that's only going to be $10 billion of the $22.5 billion that the White House proposed, and it's unclear if that'll be enough to deal with the concerns about the surge in cases that could occur in the months ahead. I
mean, it just gives you a headache trying to keep track of all the ins and outs of this. But Susan, from your perspective, does it look like there's a solution here?
Well, I don't think we know. I don't think it's perfectly clear that there'll finally be a deal. 6 months before November, Republicans do not feel a great imperative to do anything that lets Democrats out of the box that they're in on this. And you know, one reason I think Americans hate politics is you listen to all these back and forth about unrelated issues, but this was going to have real life consequences for Americans if this money is not approved. The administration says that fact, it'll be harder to update vaccines to deal with new variants, that they may have to restrict who can get the new vaccines to those who are most vulnerable. I mean, that's like the way back machine when you had to be on a certain list to get the initial vaccines that came out. So it's not a fight with shadow puppets. This is something that's going to affect Americans across the country as we go into the fall and winter, when we expect to have another surge of COVID.
Which brings us back, or me back, Sun Min, to the question of, is the White House thinking about how the American people see COVID right now? I mean, there are a lot of cases out there. Now, they tend to be mild, right, but it's not that COVID has gone away. It's still there.
Right. It's been a really big challenge for the White House for months now, if not over a year, because we see how much the public, I mean, we're tired of COVID. We all kind of want to move on and try to resume a sense of normalcy. And the White House has tried to project that in as many ways as possible. You know, last year they lifted the mask mandate. Some experts say perhaps too prematurely. And they hadn't really resisted when a federal judge knocked down that federal transportation mask mandate a few weeks ago. But they also know at the same time that, look, the pandemic is still with us. Infections are still going to be high, even though with vaccines, hospitalization and death may not be as prevalent. They still have to. They still need the tools to fight a pandemic that is still ongoing. So it's a really tough balancing act for the White House that they've been dealing with for some time, with a weary public, but a reality that is still. A reality where the pandemic is still very much with us.
And Manu, again, from the Hill perspective, is it that the Democratic members are feeling the need for COVID and Republicans aren't? I mean, that's almost too simplistic, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Look, it is a much different situation than we were back in 2020. Remember, at that time, it was almost a blank check, even in 2021 to some extent, but mostly in 2020, a blank check that Congress was writing for dealing with the COVID response. There were no concerns about offsetting the costs and not increasing the budget deficit in the process. That was not even a discussion. In fact, during the Trump time, at the end of the Trump era, they were saying, we don't really care about deficits and debt, we care about dealing with the pandemic. That has changed. The politics have changed, the concerns have changed, and the party's approaches have changed, and that has made things much more complicated on the Hill because Republicans are insisting on offsetting the costs of any new money dealing with COVID. And as a result, that has created extra complications. And remember, that first package that they passed under Biden, roughly $2 trillion, that was passed with strictly Democratic support. That was supposed to be dealing with the pandemic, but the Republicans disagreed with that approach. So it has been, under the Biden era, a much more partisan fight over additional money to deal with the pandemic, which has made things more complicated, but Democrats themselves have their own issues to deal with. But the question is here, Judy, is that going to be enough to deal with this? And then if the White House comes back and says we need more money in the fall, can they get that together by the time of the midterms? Also another complicating factor here.
And Susan, I hear you saying that for the Republicans, they just aren't hearing the imperative from their voters, from the people they answer to do something here.
There's been several strange things about the COVID pandemic that we've seen, and one of them has been that it's become a partisan split. Yeah. And Republicans, Republican voters, Republican legislators, and office holders have been have taken a different attitude toward the COVID pandemic than Democrats have. They've been much less willing to take vaccines. They've been less willing to agree with mask mandates. And there's probably a lot of reasons why that's happened, but it persists today. And that's when reasons become not a medical science issue. This has become very much a partisan political issue.
Which makes it even harder, Sunmin, for the White House, getting back to what you were saying earlier about their need to connect what they're asking for with what they see the American people need at this point.
Right, very much so. And they're just also dealing with an uphill dynamic in the Senate. I mean, 10 Republican votes in the Senate for an administration priority, even if it's something that's seemingly nonpartisan as COVID aid, is going to be a challenge, has definitely been a challenge. And just that dynamic, sort of the congressional split, has been such a big hurdle for the administration and so many other issues, and certainly is one here.
All right, well, we are going to turn now to something else that has been on the minds of people since, a little over a week ago. We had that leak from the Supreme Court. The fallout from the draft opinion that was leaked the reaction to that has only intensified this week. And abortion is now shaping up to be a top issue for midterm candidates across both parties. On Wednesday, senators voted on the Women's Health Protection Act, a bill that would legally protect abortion rights. But the Democratic-backed bill failed. Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, a Democrat, joined all Senate Republicans in blocking the bill.
This bill today is ugly, winner-takes-all politics. It is full of aggressive pro-abortion provisions. Where's the tolerance? Where's the compassion? Where's the humanity?
Democrats, including Senator Patty Murray of Washington State, expressed outrage.
What we saw today is Republicans telling Americans all over this country, and women in particular, that their voice is more important than yours, that what they believe in is more important than your choice about your own body and your own family and your own future.
So Manu, Raju, I think everybody acknowledges this vote was not going to ultimately prevail. They needed 60 votes, but what happened here?
Yeah, it was an interesting several days and a decision by the Democratic leaders not to try to get a bill to the floor that would have at least 2 Republican votes. Remember, there was no chance that this bill would pass. This was a messaging vote. It decided the Democrats wanted to essentially show that they were fighting tried to preserve abortion rights, and Republicans were opposing it. There was no chance of this getting the 60 votes needed to overcome a filibuster. That was really the only way to advance the bill, or presumably they could change the rules of the Senate, pass it along straight party lines, but you need a simple majority of votes to change the rules in the Senate, and they simply don't have that, given the opposition from Joe Manchin, Kyrsten Sinema, and as well as several others who are concerned about going that approach. But the decision by Chuck Schumer was to put a bill on the floor, the Women's Health Protection Act, that did not have the support of those two Republican moderate senators, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, two senators who support abortion rights, who believe that this bill goes too far. And instead, they decided to go with this other bill instead. And the reason why Democrats did that is for messaging purposes. They wanted to make it clear that Republicans were unanimous against them in trying to preserve abortion rights and essentially say that to overturn the Supreme Court's decision, assuming that that's what ultimately becomes law here. But now the problem with their message, though, became when Joe Manchin, the one Democrat who does oppose abortion rights, came out in opposition to this plan. And he said he would have supported that narrower approach that Collins and Murkowski backed. But Chuck Schumer did not want to go that route. Liberals in his caucus did not want to go that route. And as a result, it was 49-51 that bill failed. And it leaves, Judy, Democrats with really no clear path to dealing with this on a federal level. Really, their only hope is to convince voters to send more Democrats back to the Senate, for them to hold the House, presumably change the Senate rules next year by having enough votes, and then enacting legislation to preserve abortion rights. A really heavy lift in this difficult midterm environment, but that's really the only path they're left with if they want to deal with this on the federal level.
And Susan, as somebody who's covered this town for a little while, are these messaging votes, do they tend to be effective? Do they accomplish what the members want when they take them?
Big debate about that, because on the one hand, does it show that to your base that you were willing to stand up and take a vote on abortion rights, or is it a demonstration of weakness? Yeah. Democrats are supposed to be in control of the government. They control the Senate and the House and the White House, and yet they can't even keep their own members in line to pass a vote like this. So there was some debate within the caucus about whether this was the right thing to do, but they had nothing else they could do. Yeah. It was really their only play. And you know, if the firestorm we've seen in the past week, just wait till the real decision comes down sometime this summer, we expect. Because once a decision comes down, if it strikes down Roe v. Wade, as we expect, there are 13 states that have trigger laws that instantly go into effect restricting abortion, and there are another 9 states that have laws that were on the books when Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973 that have never been rescinded. Those could also go into force.
So-called snapbacks.
Yes, instantaneously, these pre-Roe laws could be enforced again. So the effect of a Supreme Court decision is not going to take any time to unfold.
And some men at the White House, they're watching all this, in a way, helpless to do anything. I mean, what messaging can they offer at this point?
So in terms of substance, what they have told us that they're looking into is potential executive actions that kind of nibble around the edges, if you will. So they've talked about perhaps seeing if you can use Medicaid dollars to assist women who may have to travel for another state to get an abortion if abortion would be outlawed in the state where she lives. But a lot of those actions and some of the other actions they're considering, they don't know if that's legal yet. So they were really looking towards this vote that failed on Wednesday. And their next step, the messaging from the president himself on down, is, like Susan said, you have to elect Democrats, whether it's to the Senate, to the House, especially in governors and state legislatures, which are going to take such prominent roles in the abortion debate, you know, if and when Roe is overturned. So that's really the focus of the Democratic Party right now. It just illustrates just kind of how helpless they are to do actual action in the aftermath of this decision.
And I think Democrats are now acknowledging that they have not done as good a job as Republicans in translating the whatever public support there is for abortion rights into victories in these key congressional races and other races.
Right. I mean, Republicans I've talked to, when I've especially talked to them about the impact of abortion and abortion rights in congressional races this year. And, you know, they say that at the end of the day, it's going to be the economy and inflation and other related issues that are really going to matter for voters this November. Yeah. And I think President Biden even flicked at that earlier this week when he was giving his speech on inflation, and he called combating inflation his top domestic priority. It's not voting rights, it's not abortion, it's going to be inflation. So how much this mobilizes voters this fall and has an impact, I think, is a really interesting question to watch.
You know, I think one question is whether the dynamic of the abortion debate now flips, because the energy has always been with the anti-abortion forces because they were working towards something. And the people who support abortion rights saw Roe v. Wade as something they could count on. They didn't need to worry too much, even as some restrictions were enacted. Does that change now as abortions actually are banned in some states? Does that make abortion does it make people who support abortion rights a single issue voter on this front?
Are you going to see that energy go in that direction? Yeah, well, as we saw, both parties have tried to make the debate over abortion a rallying cry in an effort to bring pro-choice and pro-life voters to the polls. But one person has been relatively silent on this. That's former President Trump. In midterm primaries this week, Mr. Trump saw his endorsed candidate win, Alex Mooney of West Virginia, and lose Charles Herbster in the Nebraska gubernatorial race. Those races are viewed as a referendum on the power of the former president's backing. Susan, I'm going to come to you here on this. I mean, we are watching every one of these candidates that former President Trump has endorsed.
Yeah, you know, he clearly has a lot of influence in the Republican Party. There's no question about that. He's clearly the face of the Republican Party. Very few Republicans are willing to challenge him, but there is just a little bit of a sense that Republicans, even those who have been on Trump's side, are willing to endorse other candidates in some of these primary races. We saw Mike Pence, for instance, endorse Governor Kemp in Georgia. Trump is very much in favor of Kemp's challenger because of Kemp's action in upholding the 2020 election. So I wonder if there is a sense that, you don't want to overstate it, but to some degree, are there those in the Republican Party who want to get a little bit past the moment when Trump could call all the shots?
And Manu, Raju on the Hill, there has to be conversation among Republicans, and I'm sure they're sharing all of this with you as they watch these Trump endorsements play out.
Yeah, no question about it. And this is really just a key month for Trump. Yeah, he did get J.D. Vance through, helped him. There's no question that he played a key role in getting him through the Ohio Senate Republican primary. He had a split decision this past Tuesday, as you mentioned, in a West Virginia House race. He did help Alex Mooney beat David McKinley in a Republican primary. It was all about the support for the infrastructural law that McKinley backed, Mooney opposed. Trump tried to get Republicans to essentially block that so Biden would not have an accomplishment. He was successful there. He was unsuccessful in the Nebraska gubernatorial race. His preferred candidate failed. But what will happen come Tuesday in the Pennsylvania Senate Republican primary? That is another big question going forward. Trump, of course, has supported the celebrity Dr. Mehmet Oz. There's questions about whether Oz can pull it off. He's in there in a very tight three-way race there. There's also the North Carolina Republican Senate primary. Also, he has backed Ted Budd, a congressman there, who's going up against Pat McCrory, the former governor, who's in a tight race there as well. And as Susan alluded to, there's the question about what will happen in the Georgia gubernatorial race. David Perdue is struggling in the polls against Brian Kemp. And in talking to a number of the Republicans, Judy, about David Perdue, a former senator, someone who they had served with for some time, they don't recognize the man who's on the campaign trail, who is espousing the same baseless conspiracy theories and lies that Donald Trump did, that the 2020 election was stolen, that there was widespread fraud that caused him the election here, but he had to do that to win Donald Trump's support. So it'll be a key several weeks here to test the sway of Donald Trump, Judy.
Yeah, we remember him as being very loyal to the president when he was in the Senate. And just quickly, finally, to you, Sun Men, the White House has to be watching all all this with some interest?
Very much so. And actually, what's been interesting to me is how much they've tried to kind of use that MAGA messaging over the last several weeks. And especially this week, they kind of rolled out the quote ultra MAGA label to label the congressional Republicans' policies. And actually, policies not just as it relates to, for example, the economy and taxation, but also as it relates to abortion. That's kind of like a catch-all label that they're using now. And you're going to continue to see that from the White House. They feel that it's an effective message. They have, they have polling that indicates that this is something that has a negative connotation with a broader voter populace. But at the same time, President Trump likes the ultra MAGA message, so they're also kind of co-opting it, particularly when Biden calls Trump, the great MAGA king. The former president likes that very much.
And just in a couple of seconds, Susan, we're only beginning to watch how the rest of this midterm year plays out.
Oh, and it's going to be important because there's every possibility Democrats will lose the House, and with that, it'll be a whole new game here in Washington.
A lot of conversation already about that here in Washington. Well, with that wonderful discussion, we thank all three of you, to Manu, to Seung, and to Susan, for joining us and for sharing your excellent reporting. And tune in Saturday to PBS News Weekend for a conversation on the abortion access debate in Latin America and how it compares to the United States. And be sure to join me on Monday on the PBS NewsHour. Thank you for joining us, and good night from Washington.
Corporate funding for Washington Week is provided by Consumer Cellular. Additional funding is provided by Koo and Patricia Ewens with the Ewen Foundation, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities. Sandra and Carl DeLay Magnuson, Rose Herschel and Andy Shreves, Robert and Susan Rosenbaum, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.